All right, Brenda, you ready?
Oh, yep.
All right, everyone, the court is going to call 2021 CR 8893 State of Texas versus Jessica Briones. Can I have parties announced for the record for the state,
Michelle Hayden and Brittany Mitchell and Michael Villarreal for the state.
for the defense?
John Foley, Your Honor, on behalf of Ms. Briones.
All right, and the court will note for the record that Ms. Briones is present. Is there any matters that we need to take up before the jury is brought in?
I don't believe so, Judge.
Judge, both sides had a couple motions in limine.
Yes.
But we're pretty much in agreement on, but just to make the court aware.
All right, and did you all file the motion in limine, or is this just an oral motion in limine?
I did, Mr. Foley.
Mine is oral, Judge.
All right, so do I have the motion in limine from the state? And Deputy Mejia has informed me that we're missing 2 jurors.
That's, I guess, the problem when we get too many alternates is they start becoming.
No, I mean, this is unusual for us to be missing, and I guess it depends on who the 2 jurors are.
Right.
So we shall see.
Alternates are.
Yes. All right, state, the clerk is going to grab your motion, but Mr. Foley, yours is oral. What is your motion?
Judge, and as Ms. Hayden pointed or said, we've pretty much agreed on this, but just to get it on the record,
Yes.
we've agreed that there will be no reference to a second child or to a subsequent CPS investigation. There was a CPS investigation done at this incident, which I don't have a problem with them going into that. I would just, because they were investigating this as well as the police investigation.
So you're saying that there's to be, I guess, without approaching, no mention of a second CPS case?
For the guilt to innocence phase of the trial, we don't intend on introducing or getting into any evidence regarding the second CPS investigation or defendant's second child. In the event that it becomes relevant somehow, we will definitely approach before getting into those matters.
All right, so there's to be no mention that a second child exists. Is that what I'm hearing?
For purposes of this phase of the trial.
All right, so if that is going to be an issue, or if it comes up, just approach before it's put before the jury.
And Judge, our motion is, we have a witness in this case, Corey Ruiz, who may testify, but in the event he does not, he has a felony conviction and was sentenced to prison. And we would like that information limited out or not to come up.
Judge, I don't have a problem approaching before we go into any of that. The only issue that I do have is how are we going to know if he's going to testify? I mean, I guess what you're saying.
Well, I mean, obviously it could come in as potential impeachment, but in the event that he does not testify, that information shouldn't come in.
Yeah, I guess I don't need to get it out of another witness anyway. I can get it from her. I mean, if he does testify.
Okay.
So yeah, I have no objection to that, Judge.
All right, so, and that's the felony conviction of Mr. Ruiz.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, just approach if that's going to be mentioned.
And then the other motion in limine matter we have is that we do not think any sort of mental health diagnosis of the defendant should come up in the guilt innocence phase of the trial.
No objection, Judge.
Okay,
Unless somehow becomes relevant, but.
all right.
Judge.
And then the other matter we wanted to ask about, we have a witness who could potentially testify during the punishment phase in the event we get there. She would like to be present in the courtroom for the guilt innocence phase of the trial. Since they're 2 separate phases, we would ask that she be allowed to stay in.
Who is the witness?
Laura Ruiz.
Defense?
Judge, I think the prosecution is going to need to make a decision on that witness. I don't think she has anything to contribute to this case. They apparently think she does. I think if they think she does, then she needs to be treated like any other witness.
Well, Judge, we don't think she has anything to contribute for the guilt innocence phase of the trial.
But it's all one trial. They're 2 separate phases, Judge, but the rule says they're excluded for the trial when any of the witnesses do.
All right. State.
Judge, at this point, we may call her for punishment. So
Okay. All right. And you all are both invoking the rule. Is that correct?
that is correct.
All right, then she can remain for opening statements, but she'll have to be excused if she's going to be testifying in punishment phase.
Okay.
Anything else? All right, then.
Yeah.
Any of? And which two jurors? Okay. All right, could I see the state and defense board, please? And Deputy Hill, can you mute us?
Yes, Judge. Yes. This one, Your Honor, I've gotten the paperwork from the state probation office. We've talked with the state. They've made an offer. I've communicated it to Ms. Martinez. Ms. Martinez indicates that she was in jail, then she got out. We were going to get together, but we didn't. She wants a contested hearing for this matter, Your Honor. I apologize for being late. I had this on my calendar for 1:30.
All right, Ms. Burgess, can you give him a reset date for a contested hearing? Okay, so Ms. Martinez, in this court, when you set something for a contested hearing, it's contested. You understand? All right.
I'm just waiting on the date for that.
All right,
So I can-
thank
so I
you.
can release all my witnesses.
Okay.
Judge, with regard to the punishment witness, we just wanted to bring the court's attention to Article 3603, invocation of the rule.
Mr. Foley? I was waiting for someone to mention that.
So it says notwithstanding rules 614 Texas Rules of Evidence, a court at the request of a party may order the exclusion of a witness who for the purposes of the prosecution is a victim, close relative of a deceased victim, or guardian of a victim, only if the witness is to testify and the court determines that the testimony of the witness would be materially affected if the witness hears other testimony at the trial. This witness that we would like to be present is next of kin. It's the grandmother of the victim. So we would ask that she be allowed to stay in.
And so here's the court's question. Is she going to provide, or does either party anticipate that she's going to provide any evidence to an issue of fact in this case?
I don't believe so.
Issue of what?
Is she going to provide any evidence that goes to an issue of fact in this case?
Well, Judge, if she's not, I think she's not a relevant witness.
Oh, no, they're just saying they want to use her for punishment. And I'm assuming as how this has affected her, if your client were to be found guilty.
Right. But my point is that those are still facts that you put on for punishment, right? And so it affects it that way. And by the way, I also don't think that this is a close relative. This woman has literally never met this child.
All right, that'll be something that you all can argue. I am for today. I will have her under the rule,
Okay.
but once both parties have a chance to give me more information about whether or not she is a fact witness or not, then the court will make a decision.
Okay.
But we have the jury in the hallway, so can you let them know we're ready to bring them in? Okay, yes, all right. Give me a moment.
All right, for the jury.
Oh, please be seated. We're missing one chair.
There's one on the back.
Oh, it's one on the end. All right, everyone, please be seated. I hope you all were able to find appropriate parking today. All right. All right, I know you all were given the oath downstairs, but I'm going to give you the oath as it relates to this trial specifically. So if you could raise your right hand for me, please. Do each of you solemnly swear or affirm in the case of the state of Texas versus Jessica Briones, you will a true verdict render according to the law and the evidence, so help you God? All right, you can lower your hand. All right, state. And Ms. Briones, if you could stand, please.
Judge, may we approach real quick?
Yes. Before we start, there's an attorney here for the state who may end up sitting on this case. And I want to make sure that none of you know him. Mr. Villarreal, if you could please stand. So this is Michael Villarreal. Is there anyone who's on the panel who knows Michael Villarreal? All right, so the court will note for the record that the jurors are shaking their head, no, that no one knows Mr. Villarreal. All right, state.
True bill of indictment.
I'm sorry.
In the name and by authority of the state of Texas, the grand jury of Bexar County, state of Texas, duly organized and paneled and sworn as such at the September term AD 2021 of the 226th Judicial District Court of said county in said court. At said term, we present in and to said court that in the county and state of said and interior to the presentment of this indictment, count one. On or about the 5th day of September 2017, Jessica Briones, hereinafter referred to as defendant, did then and there intentionally and knowingly commit or attempt to commit the felony offense of injury to a child. And while in the course of or in the furtherance of or in immediate flight from the commission or the attempted commission of this offense, the defendant did then and there intentionally and knowingly commit or attempt to commit an act clearly dangerous to human life, to wit, striking Olivia Briones against a wall, striking Olivia Briones against a door frame, striking Olivia Briones with a metal bracket, striking Olivia Briones with an object unknown to the grand jury, striking Olivia Briones against an object unknown to the grand jury, and a manner and means unknown to the grand jury, thereby causing the death of an individual, namely Olivia Briones, who was then and there a child, 14 years of age or younger. Count 2. On or about the 5th day of September 2017, Jessica Briones, hereinafter referred to as defendant, did intentionally and knowingly cause serious bodily injury to Olivia Briones, a child who was 14 years of age or younger, by striking Olivia Briones against a wall, striking Olivia Briones against a door frame, striking Olivia Briones with a metal bracket, striking Olivia Briones with an object unknown to the grand jury, striking Olivia Briones against an object unknown to the grand jury, and a manner and means unknown to the grand jury, against the peace and dignity of the state, signed the grand formula.
Ms. Briones, to count 1, how do you plead? Guilty, not guilty, or no contest? Count 2, how do you plead? Guilty, not guilty, or no contest? All right, State, do you have opening statements?
Thank you, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. On Tuesday, September 5th, 2017, Olivia Briones was already on death's door when she was brought into the True substation by her mother, the defendant, Jessica Briones, at around noon. When police officers and others began to try to help Olivia, they saw that she's covered from head to toe in new and old injuries. She's got bruising across the bridge of her nose, bruising around her eye. Her left arm's bruised and looks deformed. She has swelling to her right arm. She's got a huge bruise on her abdomen. Olivia is completely unresponsive. Her pupils are fixed and dilated. She is barely breathing, and she goes into cardiac arrest while EMS is trying to help her. And you're going to hear from some of those people that tried to help her and just how bad her condition was when she arrived. Now, Olivia is transported to University Hospital. And when she gets there, it's clear that there's little that the doctors can do for her. Medical tests show that she has a lung that's losing air. She's got retinal hemorrhaging. She's suffered severe head trauma, causing subdural brain bleeds, and the swelling inside her head is incompatible with life. And doctors notice she's got numerous scars. She's got injuries to her ears, and she appears malnourished. And when they review her charts, they see that she actually weighs less now than she did 2 years ago at a previous doctor visit when she was a 2-year-old. So Dr. Gebhardt, one of the physicians there, he talks to Jessica Briones. He's trying to find out what happened to Olivia. And Jessica's explanations don't make sense. She said Olivia was trying to climb into a chair on Friday and she fell into her head. And when he mentions her arm, she's like, oh yeah, she got her arm stuck in the door Saturday night. She said she was sitting on the floor crying last night, so I thought maybe she fell again when I left her by the door. Her explanations are not consistent with the severity of her injuries, and he'll tell you that. Olivia was pronounced dead on September 6, 2017. And Dr. Gebhardt will tell you from the moment she arrived, he knew her situation was dire. Now, Detective Juarez is asked to speak with Jessica back at the police station. And he doesn't know much about the cases, but he's trying to figure out what happened. How did Olivia get like this? So he starts asking Jessica about Olivia and what happened. And he's like, you know, why did you call for help?
And he's like, well, she's like, I didn't think it was that bad. You know, she was vomiting when we left the house and went to the bus station. And then I thought, well, I'll take her to the police station because they'll know what to do. Said her phone was low on minutes. She couldn't find it. So that's why she didn't call anybody. And he asked her about who has access to Olivia. She says, just me. She's the only one that takes care of her. They don't live with anyone else. No one else watches Olivia. Olivia's father's never been in the picture. She's the only one that's alone with Olivia. And then the defendant starts giving him excuse after excuse as to how she's got all her injuries and scars. But her excuses don't add up. And you're going to hear from Detective Barnes, who's the lead investigator in this case. And she'll tell you about her investigation, how she talked to Jessica's neighbors, to her friends, to Jessica's own mom, to businesses in the area, to other police officers, to CBS worker involved in the case. You're going to see photos of the apartment complex. You'll see photos of you'll see a crime scene video. Detective Barnes talked to doctors involved in the case. She talked to the medical examiner. She spent hours talking to the defendant, trying to find out, how did this happen? And she asks Jessica about Olivia's injuries. And again, it's excuse after excuse as to how she got all these injuries and scars. Oh, she got the scars on the top of her head because I dropped a plate and a spoon on her head when I was washing dishes. Or she'd accidentally hit her head on the door frame while carrying her to bed multiple times per week. Accidentally do it over and over again. Or she had metal barrettes that she wore that cut her hair. Or she'd accidentally close Olivia's arms in the door. Or that she accidentally hit Olivia's head on the door frame exactly where she says that she fell on Friday night. Again, the defendant's excuses don't add up. And Barnes's investigation leads to one conclusion, that the defendant did this to Olivia. Now you're going to hear from Dr. Norat, who worked for the Center for Miracles at the time. It's a special program employing doctors who specialize in child abuse. And they're called out to the hospitals when abuse is suspected. And he'll talk to you about what he does in his evaluation of Olivia and how Olivia's injuries could not have been caused by Jessica's explanations. That the severe injuries that Olivia sustained were so severe that they would have required much greater force than simply falling while trying to get into a chair or falling while standing by the door. That someone put Olivia in that condition. You're also going to hear from the medical examiner, Dr. Feig, and he did an autopsy on Olivia's body. And you'll hear how at the time of the autopsy, Olivia was found to have evidence of head trauma, both new and chronic. She's got numerous angular scars on the top of her head. Her scalp has a thickened fibrous scar tissue that he can only attribute to all her head injuries. She has a torn frenulum, left subdural hematomas, subarachnoid hemorrhages, subperiosteal orbital hematoma, a severely swollen brain. She has a contusion on the front of her nose. Her left arm has a callus indicating previous fracture. She's got hemorrhaging in her lower right arm. She has bruising on her lower abdomen and hip, right hand and right inner foot. And he'll tell you that Olivia died as a result of complications from closed head injuries, and that she died due to homicide. And he will tell you that this child could not have sustained these injuries in a normal day-to-day fall, that someone else did this to her. And all the other evidence you have will show you that the one person that could have done this, the one person who had sole care and access to Olivia, and the one person with a litany of excuses that doesn't add up is Jessica Briones. And we believe after seeing all the evidence in this case, hearing from witnesses, seeing the pictures for yourselves, seeing the injuries for yourselves, hearing from the detectives involved, hearing from the medical experts who will tell you that this was no accident, that you will find the defendant Jessica Briones guilty of felony murder and guilty of injury to child causing serious bodily injury, and we will ask that you return a verdict of guilty. Thank you.
Defense?
So I want to cover a couple of things with y'all. My name's John Foley again. And I just want to cover a couple of things with y'all that you're going to be seeing in this trial. Usually I tell jurors in trials that, you know, this is going to be fun. You're going to learn something. This particular trial is not going to be any fun at all because there was a 4-year-old child who died, just his daughter, who died. And she died traumatically. And there's no question about that. Nobody contests that. The question is how that happened. And our answer to that is we don't know. But our answer is also that they don't know. And I think if you'll keep an open mind throughout this case, and it's going to be really hard to do, because as I told you in Bordier, the state gets to go first, and they get to put up their evidence, and they get to put on their theories, and tell you how they explain everything. And you have to keep an open mind that, well, maybe there's a different explanation. And that's all I'm asking you to do. And that's what you've sworn you would do. Because that's one thing that Detective Barnes, who is the lead investigator in this case, did not do. And that's why we're here today. She got married. She came up with this theory, Detective Barnes came up with this theory early on that Jessica was guilty. Before Detective Barnes was even out of the apartment, she came over to the apartment, she looked around, and before she even left, she was already convinced that Jessica had beaten this child to death with a metal rod. The evidence doesn't support this, by the way, but she continues, once she's come up with that theory, and this is what we talked about in Bordier, remember, that one of the jurors said, well, yeah, that you'll see what you're looking for, right? And that's the problem when, as an investigator, when Detective Barnes did not keep an open mind, and when all she did was laser focus on, I'm going to prove my theory, instead of, I'm going to find out what happened, right? That's where she went wrong, and that's why we're here today. And the state, to this day, they discount any evidence that doesn't support that theory. They're looking for forensic evidence to support their theory. It's not there. And to such a great extent, by the way, you'll also hear that Detective Barnes in this campaign to convict Jessica, which is really what it was. And she's angry. I get it. She sees what has happened to this child. She makes a rather amateurish comes to the rather amateurish conclusion that she knows what happened, and she then gets angry about it, and she can't let that go. And so in this campaign to convict Jessica, she you'll be I think shocked at the things that she did to Jessica while Jessica is grieving her daughter, while her daughter is still on life support at the hospital. They are literally torturing her for hours on end, torturing Jessica for hours. They will not let her go. They tell her she's free to leave, but you'll see that she is not in fact free to leave, that she tried to leave, and that they told her, you can't leave. And then they kept her for another couple hours and continued to torture her. But throughout that, Jessica never once wavered. She said she did, in fact, come up with a lot of explanations for these prior injuries because there were prior injuries. And she said, look, this is how this happened. This is how this injury happened. And this is what we talked about early in Bordier about children that are accident prone. In this case, the mother is also a bit accident prone, but she takes responsibility for it. And she says, this happened, this happened, this happened. And when it comes to what happened that day, what happened the day that Olivia died, what happened to give her that injury that killed her, her answer is, I don't know. But maybe, I mean, she fell the Friday before, maybe something, and she hit her head and I saw it. Maybe that was worse than it looked, right? Or the night before she went to the hospital, Jessica walks into the room. She hears a noise from the other room. She walks into the room and there's Olivia sitting on the floor, and she asks her, what happened? And Olivia won't tell her. And she heard a loud noise. So she's concerned. She comes in and asks, what happened? And Olivia won't tell her, as children do. You know, this is a 4-year-old kid, and she might think she's in trouble. So Jessica tells Detective Barnes about that. She says, maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. She can't explain it, but that doesn't mean that she's guilty of beating this child to death. I personally have a theory about what happened, and y'all will find out what that is, but it really doesn't matter, because what matters is that the state is going to have to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that what they think happened is in fact what happened, not what could have happened, that maybe that happened, that it's likely that happened, that there's clear and convincing evidence that that happened. None of that. They have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that that did happen, that that's exactly what happened. And it's not. And I think at the end of this trial, you're going to agree. I think if you will keep an open mind, don't be Detective Barnes, keep an open mind and wait until you hear all the evidence. I think at the end of that, you're going to say, you know what? We really don't know. Also, just some notes on some of the things that the prosecutor mentioned. She said that Jessica, gave the excuse that she couldn't find her phone. Well, that obviously she's not going to be making excuses. Her child is in distress. What happens is she comes in, she wakes up on the morning of the 5th. She checks on the child. She's fine. Jessica then goes to the and the child is asleep. Jessica then goes to the Easy Mart or whatever it is, Quickie Mart down the street to buy a money order for rent. And is that the best parenting decision? Maybe not. But remember, she's not charged here with negligently doing anything. She's charged with beating this child to death. And that's not what happened. If at the end of the evidence, you think that, oh, well, she was negligent, she did some stuff that put her in harm's way, but she didn't beat her to death, you still have to find her not guilty. Whether or not she was negligent is for another jury to determine. That's not your job. You determine whether she's guilty of this indictment, right? So, but she does, and she'll admit to you, she left the child there. She went to the store. She got this money order. She comes back and she hears some noise, some coughing coming from Olivia's room. So she goes to Olivia's room. She opens the door and Olivia is throwing up. And now she's concerned because she's read up on head injuries. She knows that if the child is throwing up, she's got, it's possible that she's got a concussion. So she bundles her up to take her to the hospital. Now, Jessica is poor. Jessica doesn't have any money at all. She doesn't have a phone. She doesn't have a car. So she has to take the bus. She does not get on her phone because the phone that she does have was prepaid and it was out of minutes. It wasn't low on minutes. It was out of minutes. It was useless. She then, and by the way, you may think, well, okay, but you can still make emergency calls. But she didn't think of that. She's worried about getting her child as quickly as possible to help. So she's going to the bus stop, but on the way to the bus stop, Olivia starts having trouble breathing. And now Jessica is very concerned. And she takes her, she knows that the police substation is 5 blocks away. And the detective asks her over and over, well, why didn't you stop somewhere along the way to the police substation? She now bypasses the bus stop. She's just going to walk her down to the police substation because she knows they can help, right? And so she's walking her down there. The detective asks her over and over, why didn't you stop and ask somebody? Why didn't you flag somebody down and use their phone? And Jessica says, and I think quite reasonably, she says, because it's faster to walk. And my child is in trouble and she can't breathe. And I take her to the only place that I know is close that can help. And that's the police substation. And she takes her there. So that was the bit about the phone. It wasn't that she was low on minutes and she was concerned that she was going to run out of minutes. It's that it didn't have any. She didn't have a way to call anybody. And throughout this, by the way, you're going to see a lot of privilege. You're going to see a lot of situations where people, prosecutors and detectives are asking questions that only people who have never been poor would ask. Because Jessica is poor and she's in a situation, and to this day is poor, but was poor back then, and was in a situation where she had to do what she could to get by. Yeah, so I guess that's really all I have on opening statements. I just want y'all to keep an open mind, take a look at this evidence and look at it from the viewpoint of someone who is innocent. Remember, presumption of innocence. You have to assume she is sitting there wrongly accused, that she's gone through all of this, including not being able to see her child because she was detained by the police, not being able to see her child when they took her off life support, including hours and hours and hours of being tortured by the police, and not physical torture, but I'm talking about of just this
Your Honor, I would object that this is beyond the scope of opening statement.
Sustained.
Judge, I'm sorry, I'm trying to say what I think the facts are going to show.
All right, objection is sustained.
Okay. So anyway, please keep an open mind as you look at the evidence. I think at the end of this, you're going to come to a far different conclusion than the state wants you to, and then Detective Barnes wants you to. Oops.
All right, state, call your first witness.
Yes, Your Honor, the state has Barbara McCormick.
Okay. Yes. All right, attorneys, could you both approach for a moment, please? Attorneys. State's witness, if you'll take a seat, please. You raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, have a seat, and if you'll state your name for the record, please, and make sure you speak into the microphone.
Yes, ma'am. Barbara Ann McCormick.
All right, state.
Good morning, Ms. McCormick. Are you presently employed?
No, ma'am.
What are you doing?
I'm retired.
When did you retire?
In May of this year.
Okay, well, what were you doing before May?
I work for the San Antonio Police Department's a crisis response team.
And was that your first role in law enforcement?
No, ma'am.
Can you, I guess, break the jury down as to what your history in law enforcement?
For law enforcement, the history for law enforcement started off as a police officer with the United States Air Force. I was stationed here in San Antonio at Randolph. I worked for the crisis response team, which is a family violence unit established in 1996, which I was one of the original ones, for a total of 26 years. In between there, I had taken a break from PD. I went to the DA's office, worked as a protective order advocate, and then the operations manager and the training facilitator for the Family Justice Center when it first opened. And I went back to SAPD and worked for the crisis response team for the remainder of the time. And prior to the law enforcement stuff, I did work for Child Protective Services as well.
And what did you do for Child Protective Services?
I investigated cases of child sexual abuse. That was my primary role. Occasionally those cases do cross over into physical abuse cases as well.
Did you receive any kind of special training?
Oh my, for which one or all the above?
Let's talk about in your role with CPS.
Okay, with CPS, there was training involved in it, and it was ongoing, but prior to beginning the job, you got several months of training that included with interviewing skills, interviewing of adults in various roles, the children that were thought to be affected by alleged abuse, training in assessing trauma, training and assessing the psychological responses, emotional responses to said alleged abuse, the dynamics in the home that would contribute to the alleged abuse, how parents react to it, how other family members might react to it, warning signs as far as how children may behave, how children may respond, and it's anything else you can connect to all that.
What about when you went over and joined the crisis response unit with SAPD?
The crisis response team, when it started in 1996, originally we went through a couple of months of training before we ever started because it was a new program. So that all encompassed, again, interviewing skills, trauma assessment, trauma response, just with the family members, the community, just anybody that may touch an incident, investigative skills. And the reason I mentioned that it had changed over the years because there was at one point in CPS, we were responsible for assisting with investigation in different ways, which included taking photographs of injuries, acquiring medical reports, kind of putting the case together, if you will, putting the puzzle together, taking the pictures, taking the statements of the victims, taking statements of witnesses, working side by side with the detectives, whether it be special victims unit, family violence, homicide, whichever entity the case eventually led to. It dealt with law enforcement as far as, again, safety. Some medical training was in there, things to look for if you come across somebody that is injured, just basic first aid things, assessing what do you need to do. Let me see what else. Again, all the psychological stuff, the emotional responses that go with those things, what belongs in a statement, everything that kind of goes with that. I mean, there was months and months. I could list you 3 or 4 pages, single space, but that's the generality of it.
Okay. So I'm going to take you to September 5th of 2017.
Okay.
Where were you employed at that point?
I was with SAPD, and my office was at the Prue Road substation. And the address is 5020 Prue Road.
And is that in Bexar County?
Yes, ma'am.
Now on September 5th of 2017, do you recall encountering a woman named Jessica Briones?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you see Jessica Briones in the courtroom?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Can you identify her? By
This young lady over here in the teal top.
I'd ask the record reflection to identify the defendant.
Judge, I think they're asking you to comment on the way to the evidence, but we agree that she's identified Jessica.
All right, Mr. Foley, the record reflects what it reflects without my commentary. Okay, thank you. You're welcome.
So tell me what led to the encounter with Ms. Briones?
I was walking through the substation, walking back towards my office. And the way the substation is set up is when you walk from one side to the other, you can see the clear front of the substation where the entry doors are. And at that point, I saw Ms. Briones walk in with a young child, female child, carrying her in her arms, kind of like you would carry something that was heavy with your arms out like this. She walked in the substation, and from what I viewed, the child was non-responsive, wasn't moving, and there was a look of concern on Ms. Briones' face. So I walked out into the lobby, asked if I could assist. And
I'll stop you right there.
okay.
So let's talk a little bit about the layout. You said that there is, when someone is walking in to the Prue substation, what room do they enter?
They entered there. When you walk into this substation, there's a double set of doors. So say this is the outside, you walk through this and you walk through a very small space, and then there's another set of doors. And then when you walk into it's a lobby, and all the lobby has is just a few, some chairs in it waiting for, or people come up to a glass partition to talk to the service agent and ask for assistance.
Okay, so when you first viewed Ms. Briones, where were you standing in relation to the glass partition?
I was behind it. Like I said, when you see the service agent sitting there, and then behind it, of course, is the rest of the building. So I was back behind there. I wasn't in the lobby.
Okay. And I believe you gestured with your arms out flat.
Yes, ma'am, like this.
So in what way was the child situated in Miss Briones' arms?
She had one arm was kind of under the bend of the child's knee, and the other was up towards the top of her shoulders, and the child's head was just kind of leaning back.
How were the child's arms and legs?
The arms and the everything was just honestly it's just kind of hanging there. The arms, the one arm that was on the outside, obviously one was against her body, but the other one was hanging down, just like her head was.
So at what point did you, well, let me ask this. At some point, did you go and speak to Miss Briones?
Yes, ma'am, I did. When that said, I did
Where did you first speak to her?
in the lobby of this police station.
And once you got closer to her, what did you observe?
Like I said, the child's head was hanging back. The child was not moving. And I walked up to her and I started to speak, and she says, it helped my child.
So at this point, did you feel your training was helpful with this situation at this point?
Yes, ma'am.
And was there anything that concerned you about the child?
At that point in the lobby, the fact that she walked in, the position of the child, most kids, even if they're sick, they're holding their head up, but she wasn't responding. Her eyes were almost all the way closed. I could see that when I walked up to Miss Briones. And the child wasn't moving at all. And then Miss Briones had said that she had been throwing up and she couldn't wake her up.
So what did you do next?
She handed me the child. So I took the child, and when you walk, then there's doors right there. So I took Miss Briones and Olivia through the doors and into my office and laid her on the floor. So we went back behind, into the secure area and went into my office.
And what was the purpose of laying the child on the floor?
I wanted to be able to, I didn't want to set her up in a chair or anything because she wasn't responsive. I was certainly afraid that she would fall off. Laying her on the floor would give me a better vantage point to see, one, if there were any breathing issues. Laying her flat would hopefully be a benefit to her. It would also give me the room that I needed to assess her condition to see if she was okay, if there was an issue with the breathing, if CPR or something was needed, she would need to be on a flat surface in order to do that.
In order to assess someone's condition like that, do you need to find out any information from a guardian or someone with knowledge?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you do that in this case?
I did.
What kind of questions did you ask Ms. Briones?
The first one was pretty general. I asked Ms. Briones what had happened. And she said that she had been throwing up and that she couldn't wake her up. So then I had asked her if she had been, she'd gotten injured. Had she gotten hurt? She said she had fallen. I asked her, what did she fall on? She said the floor.
She said, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry, sir, the floor. She said she had fallen on the floor.
Did she indicate if there was any bleeding or anything?
I asked if I hadn't assessed her yet, so I asked her, was there any blood in the vomit? And she said, no, there had not been. I asked her if she had been, recently she had been sick. She said she had not been sick. I asked if she had had any episodes like this before. She said the child had not. And that she said that she's a healthy child.
Did she indicate when the child had fallen?
The day before.
Now, once you had Olivia on the floor and you had some information from Ms. Briones, what did you do next?
While I was gathering the information from Ms. Briones, I was looking at Olivia simultaneously. The first thing I checked for was I put my hand on her chest to see if I could feel any, breathing movement, chest movement from breathing. And there was some. It was subtle, but there was some. I checked her, I opened her mouth because I wanted to check and see if maybe there was something in her throat blocking her airway, because the breathing did have a raspy sound to it. So I wanted to see if there was something in the way, and there was nothing in her mouth. The only thing I noticed about her mouth is that her tongue was a very light pink. So at that point, I checked her eyes. So I pulled up her eyelids one at a time. And her eyelids were pretty fixed and dilated. In the whites of her eyes, you actually could not see the white part of her eyes. And there was no reaction. So like if, exposed to light, your eye would react to that. So when I lifted up her eyelids, there was no reaction from the pupils or anything.
This raspy breathing, can you explain a little bit more what you meant by that?
It's hard to describe. It was there was a noise to it. Like I said, it was a shallow breathing. So it was slow and, methodical, but there was if you've ever had type of cold and you have congestion or something, you can feel it. You can kind of feel it moving around in there, or kind of you take a deep sigh or something, it kind of has that raspy kind of guttural type sound to it, if you will. I don't know if that describes much. It's hard to describe breathing.
Did you try, you said her eyes were dilated. Was there any movement to her eyes?
Absolutely none.
Did you try to stimulate them at all?
We had tried to, I didn't have a flashlight to check her eyes or anything, but with the light of it opening her eyelids, that would have been some exposure to the light, because my office actually has lots of the the lights in there. It's a very bright room. And I also, as I was doing this, I was trying to talk to her. I was touching her face and calling her by name and just kind of casually talking to her, which usually some type of sound will elicit a response from your eyes too. So like if you hear a loud sound or something, you kind of jump, your eyes will jump with it as well. But there was no response physically or with her eyes or a change in her breathing or anything. When I called out her name, when I touched her, nothing like that. There was absolutely no motor response at all.
How did the rest of her face appear to you?
Upon initial viewing, when I saw her face, she had a bruise across the bridge of her nose, and it appeared to be that there had been some swelling there. That was her face. Now, I continued to check on her in regards to the head area. At one point, I did take her hair and kind of brushed it back because I wanted to see if we had any lacerations or anything like that. And there was no lacerations, but there was a bruising up near her hairline. And there was an indentation that was a line, as if something had been pressed against it or something had been hit that would have created an indentation. And the other thing that I was looking for as well was because Mom had said she had been throwing up. The other thing that was pretty obvious with her, there were other injuries I noticed, but that this child was very clean. There was no throw up, no vomit on her shirt, none in her hair. And her hair was, it would have, it would have been in her hair or something. And there was no odor of vomit or anything. There was nothing on. She was very clean.
You mentioned other injuries. What other injuries did you observe on her?
Without having to move her, it was obvious that on the left side of her face, she also had an abrasion. Again, it was not bleeding, but there was an abrasion on the left side of her face, kind of up towards her forehead area. Her left arm on the bicep area, there was some pretty heavy bruising there, and it actually looked like there was some swelling to her arm as well. So initially that's what I saw. Now, what the other part that I did was, because I wanted to check her, assessment, is I took her socks off of her because I wanted to check her feet again, making sure there's no injuries or whatever, so that when EMS got there, I could give them a quick rundown. She did have bruising and swelling to one of her ankles, and it was it wasn't, if you're laying down, your feet kind of go up or they kind of tilt to the side a little bit. Hers were there was one that was abnormally kind of laying more to a little bit flatter than you would expect.
Were you able to assess her temperature, her body temperature?
She was really, one of the things I noticed that she was very cool to the touch, which was kind of surprising to me because mom did not come in a car. She said she had carried her. And it was a pretty hot day. I mean, it's September in Texas, it was pretty hot. So she had actually carried her a decent distance. And mom actually looked like she was warm from the walk and from the, to the substation. But Olivia, she was pretty cool, and she hadn't been inside long enough for the air conditioner. It wasn't that cold in there.
Were you able to, you said you didn't want to disturb her, but were you able to check her backside at all?
I did. And again, this was looking for injuries that we might need to treat if we needed to, report to EMS. Is I gently rolled her over to her side. Again, we're looking for abrasions and stuff, and she had bruising on her back area. If you had to divide the back, it would be a little bit towards the lower part, but it was some pretty severe bruising there, and it covered a good portion of the area. I mean, it wasn't just like one little, penny size bruise or anything like that. It was substantial bruising, and it was easy to see, and it was the lower back because Olivia's underwear was very loose fitting. It was obviously not her size. So when I rolled her over, it slid. So it was the lower back, right above her buttocks that was very bruised. And again, all this movement to her, with these injuries and stuff, there was no physical response from her, no change in her breathing. There was nothing.
While you were assessing her, had anyone reached out to emergency medical services?
Yes, the one thing about the police station is everybody is going to jump in. So EMS had been called as soon as she came in, and with my office, everybody, of course, they came to see what was going on. Struck them, they needed to call EMS, so they had called EMS, and there were several people around.
Could you tell if the injuries you observed, did they appear to be like fresh injuries, or
They were
make that determination?
No, they were fresh. If they had been older, the bruisings would have been more of a brownish, yellowish, kind of faded. These were purple. They were bright in color, red, purple. So they had to have been fairly recent, and there was not a stage of healing. They were all about the same.
Now turning to the defendant, Jessica Briones, what was her demeanor throughout this encounter?
She was very calm. She walked in, she was very calm. She was pretty collected. Now, when I initially put Olivia on the floor, Ms. Briones was on the floor with me, and she was at the head of Olivia, on her knees, and she was present there. But she didn't really say anything. There was no emotions were very much in control.
In your experience, have you encountered situations with a parent whose child was injured?
Yes, many times.
Would you say that Ms. Briones' demeanor that day was typical? What you had seen?
Objection and relevance, Judge.
Sustained.
Mr. Byrne?
Okay. So
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes.
Ms. McCormick? Ms. McCormick, I'm handing you what has been labeled at this point for identification purposes as State's Exhibit number 1. Do you recall reviewing this?
yes, ma'am.
What is it?
It's a videotape of the initial when we were doing the assessments on Olivia and taking place in my office.
Okay, now you said videotape, but what is this?
I mean, it's a it's a video. It's the rope cam
Okay,
from the police officers.
and it's preserved on a disc.
Yes,
Now, and the signature here, is that your signature?
yes, ma'am, it is.
Now on this video, were you able to identify the individuals
Yes,
in the
ma'am.
video?
Yes, ma'am.
And who was there?
There was a detective Gallegos that was also present. He helped in assessing Olivia with me. He came in after the fact. There was a safe officer by the name of Tony Elias, who was used to be a CRT officer. And then there was there were multiple people in there, but there was also a Yvette Mead, who was another officer. Of course, we all work at the Peru Road substation. And then there were a couple of sergeants and they were roaming around from the B shift because it was getting close, or from A and B shift that were getting ready to change.
Okay, and would you say that what is depicted on the video that you reviewed is a fair and accurate depiction of the events that day?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, I would offer State's Exhibit number 1.
No objection, Your Honor.
Right, State's Exhibit number 1 is admitted without objection.
Your Honor, may I publish?
Yes. No, Deputy Laura. But there's Brenna. And Deputy Michelle, yes.
Not to slide that down here.
Is the audio not working? Do you have the Zoom for him in case the audio doesn't work? The Zoom link. Okay. In case the audio doesn't work. Yeah, it's very faint. Are you going to start it over from the beginning?
We'll start. We'll back up a little bit. What's your name? What's your name? What's your name? What's your last name? What's your name? Yours is 316. Rating. Yeah, that's what I'm telling you. Right. Yeah, how old is he? 4. Olivia's last name. What's Olivia's name? Olivia. No, anything she might have gotten into. Daisy. Might as well. Yeah, very strongly. Ms. McCormick, what time of day was
It was shortly afternoon, it was early afternoon.
it? And I think we glossed over this. What was the little girl's name?
Olivia,
And how old was she?
4.
So after you assessed her, what were your concerns at that point?
Well, the obvious concerns were her injuries, and we knew EMS was on the way, but also how any of this could have happened, to give us a better idea of what, to tell EMS when they got there.
And what explanation was given as to what happened?
That she fell on the floor.
Would that have explained all her injuries?
No, ma'am.
So, how quickly did EMS?
Gosh, it's hard to tell when you're in the middle of all that. They got there fairly quickly. I mean, I couldn't give you a specific time frame, like it's in minutes, but it didn't take very long at all.
And how long did you stay with Olivia?
I was with her from the time they brought her in, and once EMS showed up. I mean, I could make a guesstimate, but I couldn't swear to the time frame. But I was with her from the time that she walked in the substation until EMS came in, and then I stepped out in the hall because they needed lots of room.
I'll pass the witness room.
Defense.
Ms. McCormick, my name is John Foley, and I represent Jessica Briones. I don't have very many questions. I do have a couple. But first, I would like you to know that my client has told me that she is very appreciative of the help that you all
Okay,
gave.
so the-
Sustained.
You said that Ms. Briones said, you asked her what had happened that morning, and that she said she went in, she heard Olivia throwing up and went in to check on her, correct?
I believe so.
I'm
I know
sorry.
I didn't say that today. I said that she had told me that she had thrown up.
Right, but in fact, thinking back, did she tell you that she had heard her throwing up, she had heard Olivia throwing up, and then she went in to check on her?
That's reasonable.
Okay. It's just, there have been some confusion. I think some of the people at the hospital thought he said something
Your
else.
Honor, object to sidewalk.
Sustained.
You said that Jessica appeared very calm during this. In fact, looking at that video, she looks kind of like a deer in the headlights, doesn't she?
I would suppose that's a matter of opinion, and that's the impression I got, is what I said earlier, that she was calm. That was my impression. I guess you could anybody watching it could get a different impression, I guess, but
I'm sorry.
I guess anybody watching the video, such as yourself, could get a different impression, but that was the impression I had that day.
Okay. Okay. That's all I have.
State.
Nothing further. Your Honor.
All right, is this witness excused or subject for recall?
Judge, I'd like to keep her subject to recall.
All right, the rule has been invoked. What that means is you cannot discuss your testimony with anyone except for attorneys for the state of the defense. Do you understand?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, just make sure you're available if anyone's needed you to come back.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
State, call your next witness.
State calls Officer Mead.
Officer Mead, if you'll take the stand, please. Can you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, you can lower your hand if you state your name for the record.
Yvette Mead.
State.
Good morning, Detective. Will you please introduce yourself today?
Yes, good morning. I'm Detective Yvette Mead. I'm over at the Prue substation. During the incident, I was a officer. I'm detective now.
How long have you been with the San Antonio Police?
17 years.
And you partially just said this, but when did you get promoted from an officer to detective?
In February.
And where are you currently assigned?
I'm assigned to the crisis response team, the family violence at the Prue substation.
Now, on September 5th, 2017, how were you assigned?
I was part of the Safe Patrol, which is the community policing, San Antonio Fear-Free Environment.
Okay, so it's an acronym, SAFFE.
Correct.
You said that's San Antonio Fear-Free Environment.
Correct.
And how is working for SAFE different than Safe Patrol?
We usually work with the community more. We do help with patrol when they're really busy, but we're kind of a we kind of do a little bit of everything, but we do have like HOA meetings, active shooter or presentations. We do a little bit of everything.
Were you called to the Prue substation on September 5th, 2017?
I was not. I was actually at the sub working.
And do you recall encountering an individual named Jessica Briones?
Yes.
Do you see Ms. Briones in the courtroom today?
Yes.
Would you please identify her by an article?
She has the green shirt on.
What brought your attention to Ms. Briones on September 5th of 2017?
There was a commotion, I guess, in the lobby area, and one of the detectives had come in to ask us for any kind of medical, what am I trying to say? Like, if we had any kind of medical equipment. And then I went into one of the offices, which was part of our CRT offices, and Ms. Briones and her daughter were in the location. Her daughter was laying on the ground.
What could you see? You said her daughter was on the ground. What were your observations about her daughter?
When I saw Olivia, she was lethargic. She was unresponsive to the detective that was looking at her. Her head looked a little disproportionate. I can't remember, her eyes were wide open, but there was no kind of activity when we were trying to talk to her.
Did she appear, other than her current status, how was her frame? How would you describe the frame of her child?
She looked malnourished. I think I remember just discoloring towards her socks of her skin. She looked very skinny, possibly for her. At that point, I really didn't know her age, but she did look very skinny. And again, malnourished.
So, what did you do at this point?
I just assisted because there was already two people working on her. So I was just standing by if they needed anything else. And I think EMS and fire had already been called out. So we were just waiting at that point if they needed any more assistance with her.
How long, but were you with Olivia while she was still at the free substation for the entire time?
No, there was portions where I was going out if anybody else needed help with anything. And then also at that point, I think Ms. Briones was taken out of the room. And then we were trying to decide what we needed to do at that point. We were just trying to figure out where they lived, et cetera, get some information. Pretty much, we knew at that point based on the way she looked that it wasn't good.
Could you elaborate a little bit what you mean by she didn't look good?
Again, typically, when you have your eyes wide open, you most cases you would get a little bit of a response from a child. There was no response. It was just lethargic, meaning there was no activity. I felt like there was no activity mentally or physically. She was just laying there. She wasn't responding to us with her eyes open. Again, the head looked disproportionate. It didn't look, your normal head, that there may have been some injuries possibly. She was very skinny. And then again, the discoloring of her skin.
Did you have any further involvement in this case?
I did assist with going to talk to some of the neighbors, and then find if we had any witnesses and where she lived.
And where did she live?
I do not have that. I apologize. I can tell you where it's at, but I don't know the address off the top of my head. It's off of Hebner.
Do you know what the name of the apartment complex is?
I don't. It's behind the Prue substation, roughly.
Is it close to the?
Yes, it is.
Can you tell me a little bit about the area in between the apartments and the Prue substation?
So you've got the Prue, well, to kind of, I'll give you like a T. So here's Hebner, here's Fred. If you go a little bit further down, there's Prue right here, and our substation's right here. Behind us, we have like a green belt, a little bit of a wooded green belt. And then on the other side of Hebner, you've got several apartment complexes. So it's not far from the location.
Is it a heavy traffic area?
Yes.
And are there commercial businesses in there?
Yes. Mhm. You've got gas stations, a couple of restaurants, maybe Bill Miller's, some other places down the way.
Did you go, you said you went to the apartments. Did you go to the apartment where this would have occurred in?
From the outside only. I did not make entry.
Now, were these apartments in Bear County?
Yes.
How many neighbors did you speak with?
I think only two, actually two. The downstairs neighbor. And then I didn't particularly talk specific to the one. I think I'm going off memory. There's two here, and this is where Ms. Briones lived. And then the one over here to someone else was talking to her while I was listening.
Hold on, witness room.
Defense.
You said that Olivia looked malnourished. By that, you mean she looked skinny?
Yes. I can't recall if I saw ribs or not.
Okay. But you're basing that,
On what a normal child would look like.
I'm sorry.
I said, I'm basing it on what a normal child typically would look like if they've been eating.
Okay. Well, normal children, I mean, would you agree that children are all up and down the scale in terms of weight and height?
Correct. But when you've seen malnourished children before, you usually pick it up.
Well, we've all seen children malnourished in pictures of, of third world countries, right?
Well, I've seen them actually on duty.
I'm sorry.
I've actually seen them on duty. So in person, yes.
And one of the things, like if they had a distended abdomen, that would tell you that's a sign. She didn't have that, did she?
I don't recall that.
Okay. She was skinny.
Yes,
Okay. And in fact, her mother, you saw her mother too, correct?
yes,
Her mother's a small person, correct?
yes.
Very tiny frame. Okay. I pass the witness.
No further questions, John.
Is this witness excused or subject for recall?
You can excuse the judge. I don't think I'm gonna need it.
State, excused? All right, the rule has been invoked. What that means is you can't discuss your testimony with anyone. The only persons you're allowed to speak to are attorneys for the state in defense. Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
State, call your next witness.
Judge, maybe approach real quick.
Yes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give you a short recess. There are some matters, if you guys can have a seat. There's some matters that I need to take up. So we're going to come back at 3:20. And I know I didn't address this with you all before, but a lot of times you will see people coming through the side doors or people in the courtroom. Even though we're in jury trial, I do still have a full docket. And when you see people coming from the side, that's for me to sign documents that's unrelated to this case. And when you see people coming through that door, it's because they don't read the sign that says, "Do not enter jury trial in progress." All right, you've heard some evidence in this case. You're not allowed to discuss it amongst yourself. You're not allowed to talk to each other about it. I'll let you know when it's time to deliberate. All right, and no investigation, no Googling, no listening to anyone if they are saying things about this case. Make sure you keep those badges on at all time, because sometimes attorneys will be walking around and other people will discuss things. But if they see that you're a juror, they should not be doing that. All right, everyone, please rise.
The cameras, if you could mention. it.
No, they're not. All right, everyone, please rise. And the deputy will escort you out. All right, everyone can be seated. And my understanding, there are some redactions that you all need to look at.
Judge, I think we can actually agree to them. I just didn't have a chance to actually redact them, and they're records that we're introducing through the next witness.
All right, defense, you want to review that with the state?
Yeah, we already agreed, Judge.
That portion right there.
Okay, well, I
Judge.
find it best if you are doing the redactions with the black marker, then just reprint it with the black marker, because otherwise you can still see through.
Okay, so do it with a black marker instead of the whiteout.
Can you see through? Can you see through the whiteout or no?
I don't think so.
All right, just then use the whiteout and make sure that you all look at it to make sure that nothing can be seen.
Thank you, Judge.
All right.
Also, I don't think there's gonna be, that the jurors are gonna be watching TV between now and 3:20, but
I always see instructions that I have to get.
You want us from you?
did you say you have instructions to?
Yes, Okay, well, I'm gonna bring the jury back in.
All right, to the jury.
Oh, please be seated when you come in. We stand for you. And you can sit in whatever chair you want to sit in. They're all hard. All right, everyone, please be seated. And state if you'll call your next witness, please.
He calls George Gonzalez.
All right, if you have a seat here, please. Would you raise your right hand for me? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God? All right, you can lower your hand if you could have a seat and make sure you speak up so the court reporter and the jurors can hear you. If you could state your name for the record.
My name is George Gonzalez.
State.
Good afternoon, Mr. Gonzalez. Can you tell the jury who you work for?
Work for a San Antonio Fire Department.
And what do you do? As San Antonio Fire?
Currently a paramedic in the field.
And how long have you been in that role?
21 years.
And what did you do before that?
I was in firefighting division for 15 years.
So total 36 years?
That's correct.
And what sort of training do you have in rendering emergency medical care?
Well, they give us a course, starts off with about, for paramedic, it's a 2-year course. We kind of cram it into about 6 to 8 month class. And then a lot of continuing education and on-the-job training.
And do you have to do any updated education for your role?
Yes, every year we have to do 40 hours continuing education, and throughout the year is a lot of updates and changes we have to review and test over. It's good. It's ongoing.
And how many times would you estimate in your 36-year career you had to have the occasion to be called out to scenes to render emergency medical care?
How often? How many times?
Yeah.
I couldn't put a number on that. It's been many, thousands.
And what does that entail?
It could be anything from, simple injuries during sporting events to shootings or strokes or heart attacks, car accidents, assaults, a lot of car accidents. That's about it, really. That's the majority of it.
So you've pretty much seen it all in
I've seen, yeah, it's been quite a few things.
On September 5th, 2017, were you called out to render care to Olivia Briones?
Yes, I was on a medic 21 that day with 2 new medics.
Do you guys maintain reports or records with regard to your treatment of those patients?
It's submitted and it's on file. Our medical director has access to it.
Can you sign those reports?
Yes, we sign on anytime we come on duty, and we sign on to our computer, and we're signed on every call that comes in at that point.
And those reports, do you know if they're maintained in the ordinary course of business?
Yes.
Do you remember about what time you were called out to render care to Olivia Briones?
I believe it was in the afternoon, early afternoon.
And what did you do when you arrived at the scene?
On this particular case, since I had two new medics with me and I was kind of their preceptor, fire crew was already doing some emergency care with the patient. And then our two guys jumped in and started taking over the paramedic skills. One paramedic was already there on scene on the fire crew, had kind of established some things. Then they all worked together and I was kind of overseeing everything and helping out with whatever they needed.
Do you remember anything about Olivia Briones' appearance?
What I can recall, was not conscious. Looked younger than the actual age we found out later, and had some bruising to the face, arms. That I can recall offhand right now, the arms and face for sure.
Do you remember how old she was?
She appeared to be around 4, but turned out to be a little older than that. But I don't remember the exact age.
Do you remember her date of birth offhand?
Offhand, no, I do not.
Would it be helpful to review those records and refresh your memory?
Yes.
Show me what's marked as State's Exhibit 2. And do you recognize that as your report?
Yes. Yes.
What was Olivia Briones' date of birth?
We have a date of birth of 6/10/2013, showing her to be 4 years of age.
And what did you guys do to try to help Olivia?
Her breathing was, we had to assist her breathing for sure. I think they had stopped CPR about the time we got there. It was reported they were doing CPR, but the breathing was what we call agonal, and it was not sufficient. So we had to assist her breathing with what we call a bag valve mask, and just try to support the airway that way. I believe they also had an IV or IO that goes into the bone. I think they had established an IV or an IO for intravenous medications if necessary. That's one thing to do, because I think one of the medics gave a bolus of fluids, which is what we do in a cardiac situation. But if I'm not mistaken, the CPR was stopped. But we did have to assist the breathing.
And agonal breathing, just because some of us may not be familiar with those terms, what does that mean?
The respirations were too far between. There was too much time between each respiration, so they're not going to be oxygenating properly. And at that point, we have to assist by mechanical devices or a bag valve mask to help with the breathing to get it up. Get the O2 oxygen saturation to a normal range and try to perfuse oxygen a lot better. So agonal respirations they're too slow.
And you mentioned cardiac arrest.
Yeah, it was reported to us that the CPR was done prior to our arrival. And I don't recall us doing CPR throughout the transport.
And just to clarify for the jury, what does that mean when someone's in cardiac arrest or that you're having to do CPR?
Sometimes there won't be a pulse detected. And when we have that and no other obvious signs of long-term death, we perform CPR. And at one point in time, evidently they found a pulse and had a blood pressure. And so CPR was discontinued, but the breathing was still assisted.
But at some point her heart stopped.
Evidently, they had no pulse detected. They assumed that they had no heart rate at that time.
Now, did you document anything with regard to her extremities?
Yes, there was a bruising on all four extremities and abdominal and back area and chest and head. All different colors, different stages of healing. And there was a deformity to the left humerus, the left arm.
Did you document anything about any other extremities?
Let's see. Yes, the right forearm and elbow as well had swelling. But the deformity is mainly to the left humerus, left arm.
Did you make any observations about her head or face?
The observations I made on her face, I remember bruising to the face. I don't remember anything deformed on the face. I just remember the bruise and discoloration.
Do you remember anything about her eyes?
I don't recall checking her eyes personally. I recall them being closed. So if somebody may have opened to check for a pupillary reaction, I don't recall that. But it was documented that I think they did.
Did you receive any reaction whatsoever from Olivia Briones while you were treating?
None, not that I can recall. There was no movement, no neurological signs of anything. Just unconscious the whole time is all I can recall.
And what sort of things do you look for to see if there's any sort of neurological activity going on?
When we check the eyes, the flutter, their eyelids, if a lot of times, or the eye movement, you have some eye movement, either back and forth, depending what the situation is. But usually like a little flutter of the eyelids would be one of the things we check for, or any kind of movement. If you pick up an arm, if they'll pull back, any kind of reaction to you touching them or handling them or picking them up.
And where did you take Olivia Briones?
Went priority 1 to University Trauma Center.
And what is priority 1?
We're assisting breathing en route and unconscious patient with unknown internal injuries and not responding to us. So that makes it a high priority.
How many different priority levels are there?
We have 3, one being the highest, and that's lights and siren. And it could be, in this case, I think we carried it off as a trauma alert. We have also alerts on the priority 1s, and then the priority 2 is no lights, no siren, but they have to be seen. Priority 3, they can basically go into a hospital and be taken to what they call a triage area, a waiting room, basically.
So you guys gave this the highest priority?
That's correct.
What indicators made you guys feel that this needed to be priority 1?
The patient being unresponsive and having to assist the breathing, and but the appearance of the child indicating possible injury, unknown how damaged internally, but the unresponsiveness is the number 1.
Judge, this time I'm going to offer State's Exhibit 2 into evidence.
Any objection?
No
All
objection. No.
right, State's Exhibit number 2 is admitted.
And it asked to publish to the jury.
Granted.
Now, George, I'm going to have you kind of walk the jury through what they're looking at with these records. Can you see that?
Yes, so this is the case showing all the people on the unit. This happens to be the medic unit, medic 21. It shows who signed on, and it has our response information and what we ended up doing at the end of the call and all the times. The time on scene, time during transport, and when the call came in, and when we got to the hospital.
And down below here, this information.
So this is the patient information that we obtained about the about the child, or the age, address, And if possible, social security number, if it's available, personal effects. Sometimes they have things with them, but just kind of, we can record here everything that's with the patient. And of course, next to kin. And if you have insurance information and any past medical history at the bottom, we'll have this area here to document that as well.
And then what about this up here?
So here it has the assessment that we're making on seeing what we're doing. So it shows we assisted ventilations and it shows what we used, the bag valve mask for assisting ventilations, and also shows that she was unconscious. And below impression cardiac arrest, which is what we made the call for originally. And on the trauma, nothing was entered there. It may not have made that determination on this assessment at first. And then we have below that all the vital signs. So by then they had a pulse detected and it was weak, but did have a blood pressure and was oxygenating pretty good at 100% at this point. And there were also shows the blood glucose, which is quite high. And we have a GCS reading kind of indicating their mental status, which hers was at the bottom, at the least amount, which is a 3. There was no, she was totally unconscious.
GCS, what does that stand for?
That's a Glasgow Coma Scale, kind of indicates if they're alert and the level of alert that they are, maybe if they're confused or not, or just no reaction at all.
And what are the different rankings on the Glasgow Coma Scale?
1 through 15, 15 being the best, but like everybody here is alert and oriented and can speak and can move all their extremities and is coherent. And 3 being the worst, where there's absolutely no reaction, no response whatsoever, verbally, to pain stimulus or anything.
And then the pupil dilation, what does that indicate, if anything?
If it's dilated, it's kind of indicating there's not been much oxygenation to the brain.
And what would lack of oxygen to the brain indicate, if anything?
Lack of it was, it's not good. I mean, that's you can't be without oxygen. The brain cannot be without oxygen very long before damage starts to set in.
And then what about this page? Can you walk me through this?
Yes, on treatment summary. So the treatment has a bag valve mask, BVM, and it looks like it was the pediatric side, so we have to use a small size. I had the monitor, a cardiac monitor on with pads, just in case there was went back into full arrest. We have the pads on if we have to shock, if it's a shockable rhythm. And below that, we had the child on oxygen. And let me see, continued on with the bag valve mask. It has treatment on here as CPR on one of the areas. So went back into rest at 4 to 8 minutes. I guess had to do CPR again en route.
So her heart stopped again, is that what that?
Or got so weak that we couldn't detect the pulse and may have had what we see on the monitor as electrical activity, but no pulse, pulseless electrical activity. If we didn't detect the pulse, we'd probably do CPR and get that back up. They gave a bolus of fluids, had an IV as an IO was in the left leg. That's a needle into the bone, since must have had poor IV access in the extremities. We'll go straight to an IO, which goes into the interosseous, into the bone.
And then this next page.
So at the top, we have a written narrative, basically what we had in front of us, what we saw, what we did, and the changes en route to the hospital, if any. And it tells also where we went and for what reason. And we went to a trauma team at the University Hospital. And in the bottom of that narrative, we always follow through with Child Protective Services on any case that there's any questions on. Even though we knew firefighters or the police may have done it, we still have to do it because all the cases, everybody's report is separate. So it's always, we're always told to make our own report, no matter who else is involved.
Your signature is down here. at the bottom.
Yeah, we sign on it, when we sign onto this computer for every run that's generated throughout the call, the shift, our signature will be attached to it.
What happened when you arrived at University Hospital?
The trauma team on the priority ones usually meet us at the door. So we came in with the child on the stretcher and went straight into the trauma center, which is a few feet from the door, and transferred the patient to the bed and let the emergency staff do their own assessment. And then they ask us for our report.
And you mentioned contacting CPS. Why did you feel the need to contact CPS?
It looked like there was a lot of questions about the bruising and the fact that this patient was a child and unresponsive. And we didn't know what was going on. So we have to generate a case with Child Protective Services so they can look into it. Like I said, no matter who else was involved, somebody else may have done the same thing, but we have to make our own report.
You guys leave her in the care of University Hospital.
That's correct.
I'll pass the witness.
Defense?
Gonzalez, you in fact, you're required by law to report anytime you think that there might be.
Yes, sir.
Right.
And that's for any age.
Right, and that's any sign, like basically if a child has bruises, you're pretty much gonna report it.
Yeah, if it's in question or for any reason, yes.
Okay, let me ask you this, did you check for deviation of the trachea?
Well, the patient that small, for it to be deviated, there would be a severe injury for that to happen, but we didn't see any obvious deviation. None was reported by the guys who were maintaining the airway at any time.
Okay, and that, when somebody has, well, first off, what's a pneumothorax?
When you have air escaping into your chest cavity from the lung,
A collapsed lung, basically,
yes,
and the air gets between the chest cavity and the lung, is that what happens?
yes, yeah.
And
And that puts pressure inside that cavity.
which then pushes the lung further and makes it collapse further, correct?
Yeah, the next one over, and of course the trachea will follow.
Right, so when you're breathing with a pneumothorax, one lung is pulling harder than the other, correct?
It's building up pressure against it, so it can't expand
Okay.
as good as it should.
But what causes the deviation of
That pressure and the cavity pressure and everything just kind of pushes over to that side a little bit.
and y'all were not able to see any deviation? Of
I don't recall any of that. No,
And y'all didn't do a chest tube or anything like that for?
no.
Um,
Yes, yeah. There was no chest tube was used in the field.
I'm sorry,
No chest tube was performed in the field on this patient.
okay. You said that CPR was stopped by the time you got there. Did your team do CPR, or what do you mean when your team got?
Yeah, there was a bystander CPR, I think, was reported, but then the fire crew got on scene with a medic on the crew. They reported CPR. And then by the time we got there, evidently a pulse was detected by them or the medics was as we came in. And I don't remember if we were still doing CPR, but we did detect a pulse at one point and did stop.
But somebody did CPR.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
When you say that when the fire crew, you are the fire crew. Right?
I'm on the ambulance. I'm on the medic 21 that day. There was an engine company that made the scene before us, and they had a paramedic and basic EMTs on the unit as well.
I got you. Okay. You're still part of the fire department, but
Yes, sir. It's all together, all work together.
okay, got it.
There's a lot. We have more engine companies and fire stations, so they get there before a medic unit and can get things started before as a medic arrives.
Makes sense. These injuries that you saw, did not appear to be consistent with a single fall. Is that right?
No,
Onto a floor.
no. Seemed like there'd been a few in different stages of healing.
Well, but I'm talking about the fresh injuries, did that appear consistent? You said there was some bruise across the nose. Did you say that or the other
There was bruising all about the face, yes.
face? Okay. But those injuries appeared to be more consistent with something like a serious accident, right?
Yeah,
Car wreck or falling downstairs.
a fall, yeah, a simple fall could cause those injuries, yes.
Right, okay. I mean, but like a fall downstairs or something like that could have, right?
It could have.
Um, Did you? Pass the witness, Judge.
State?
Defense asked you if falling could cause the bruise you saw to her face.
Is asking if the bruising was,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, one more time.
He asked you if falling could cause the bruise that you saw to her face.
Falls can cause bruising to the face,
Could
yes.
being struck with an object cause the bruising to her face?
Yes,
Could being struck against an object cause the bruising to her face?
yes.
Ask the witness.
So what you're saying is there's basically multiple explanations for those kind of injuries. correct?
Yes, sir.
Pass the witness.
And we're just talking about the bruise on her face. Is that correct?
Right now, we're just asking questions, just the bruising on the face, correct?
Ask the witness.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. There were bruises, there were multiple bruises and different injuries on her body.
That's correct.
And what I'm asking is, could those bruises have been caused by a fall downstairs or?
They could have been, all the injuries could have been caused by that.
Pass the witness.
And those injuries, could they have also been caused by being struck by an object
Yes,
and being struck against an object?
that's correct.
And wasn't it your testimony that the bruises appeared to be in different stages of healing?
Yes,
Pass and answer, Judge.
Overrule.
And it was also your testimony that they were all over.
yes,
And based on your experience in going out there, you felt the need to prosecute.
yes. Yeah, as a crew, we all made that determination. It was definitely time to follow up with them as well. Get a case.
Ask the witness.
So again, just like with the bruise on her face, there are multiple explanations that could explain those. two.
Yes, sir.
Pass the-
No other questions.
All right, is this witness excused or subject for recall?
He's excused by the state.
Judge, I would like to keep it subject to recall.
All right, the rule has been invoked. What that means is you can't discuss your testimony with anyone. The only persons you're allowed to speak to are attorneys for the state of defense. Just make sure you're available if someone needs to recall you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
State, call your next witness.
Your Honor, the state would call Detective Raul. Juarez.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth? So help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, you can lower your hand if you'll state your name for the record.
My name is Raul Juarez.
All right, state.
Detective Juarez, how are you presently employed?
Yes, ma'am. Currently, I am a detective with the San Antonio Police Department, and I work in the homicide detail.
And how long have you been employed with San Antonio Police Department?
I've been in, on the department 18 years.
And where are you currently assigned?
With the homicide section, and I'm in the murders detail.
How long have you been assigned there?
I've been there since 2015.
So September 5th of 2017, you were homicide murders.
Yes, sir.
How long have you been a detective?
I have been a detective since December of 2010.
How many murders have you?
Okay, so how many murder investigations have been a part of? A lot. Well, I mean, I mean, not to take it lightly. Before I used to work in the night detective detail, and those guys work overnight, and I used to go to a lot of murder scenes before the real murder detectives came to investigate. So if you add that, I would say several dozen.
Now, September 5th of 2017, do you recall helping on a case against an individual named Jessica BRIONES?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember in what capacity you were called to help in that case?
So at that time I was in the murders detail. So I was working on the homicide side, and the SVU, the family violence detectives, are in the hallway, not really across, but they're kind of across from us. And detectives from that unit came over saying they had a case involving a child, and they needed our assistance because they believe the child's injuries were so severe that she was not going to survive.
So at the time, to be clear, at the time you became involved, was the child still alive?
From my understanding, yes, ma'am. I never saw the child. I didn't go to the hospital, so it was bad enough that they were going to get murders involved. So, yes, ma'am.
And did you know the status of the child?
It was grave. I mean, I don't know I didn't know the extent of the injuries other than it was bad, you know.
Did you know if the child was in the hospital or not?
Yes, so from what the SVU detective told us, the mother,
Object to hearsay.
Sustained.
as far as I knew, she was in the hospital. Yes, ma'am.
Oh.
So at the time of your involvement, you had not, had you gone out to the scene?
No, ma'am. I never went out to the scene.
And had you spoken to any of the responding officers?
The responding officers, no, ma'am.
And you testified that you had not seen the child, correct?
That's correct, ma'am.
Had you ever spoken to the defendant, Jessica BRIONES, before?
Before that day, no, ma'am.
So where did you meet Miss BRIONES?
At the homicide office, ma'am. She was transported there by our patrol officers, and I conducted an interview with her.
Where are the interviews, or where was the interview with her conducted?
So in the homicide office, we have our little cubicles, which we call our offices. And then there's interview rooms. There's 6 interview rooms. And yes, it does feel like you're in the first 48, because that's what everybody says when you get in them. It's just a small gray room with 2 chairs, a small table, and then there's a camera there, and everybody always looks for it, and sometimes they find it.
Where was the camera located in that room?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, don't look in the thermostat in the interview room, because that's where the camera is.
Now you said it was a gray room. Is it?
It's gray, really dingy looking fabric. I don't know what to describe it. It's not as nice as it is in here. It's gray. It's utilitarian, I guess would be the word. Yes, ma'am.
And how big is that room?
Oh, ooh, all right. 6 by 8.
So it's pretty small.
Yeah, it's a small room. Yes, ma'am. I should have
Um,
just said that. Yes, it's a small room, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So, do you recall what time of day it was that you met with Ms. Briones?
I don't exactly, ma'am. It was in the afternoon. I'm sure it's in my pros guide.
Would it, help your recollection to review a copy of your report?
Yes, ma'am, please.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
And I am handing you what is labeled for identification purposes, a state's exhibit number 3. What is that?
That is my supplemental report. My report.
How do you know it's your report?
Because it's got my name at the bottom and I remember typing it
Okay.
very slowly.
Would that aid your recollection to review that?
Yes, ma'am.
You may read it to refresh yourself, but do not read directly.
Okay. So it was around 12:31 when I became involved with the case.
So before you began interviewing Ms. Briones, really a lot of your interviews, what did you do in this case?
I read her Miranda rights.
Did she indicate that she understood them?
So initially I read them completely. And she was kind of like, what's going on? So Miranda rights, being in an interview room at homicide is a serious matter, obviously. So I want to make sure she understood. So I went through each of the elements of the Miranda right to make sure she understood. And once she did, we continued.
So she indicated that she understood her rights.
Yes, ma'am.
And she chose to continue the interview.
Yes, ma'am.
To be clear, at this point, was she under arrest?
No, ma'am.
How common is it for you to assist family violence in this manner?
So unfortunately, the only time that I've ever had to either helping another homicide detective or myself taking the case, helping family violence has been when either when one of their victims, whether it's a child or adult, passes away. So if they have a case where, allegations of child abuse or family violence between, dating violence, that's when we become involved.
So after you read her rights, what was the purpose of interviewing this parent?
So from my understanding, there was a child with injuries at the hospital. Ms. Briones was the mother's child, Olivia's mom. And as far as I knew, there was nobody else involved with the.
Sorry, Judge, could I ask that you instruct the witness to pull the microphone a little closer? I'm just having trouble.
Okay,
All
sir.
right, thank you. If you make sure you're speaking to the microphone.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So what was the purpose in talking to her?
Well played, sir. The purpose in talking to her was to establish, try and figure out what happened to Jessica. I mean, that's a simple point of it. Jessica is 4, injured. We could, as far as I know, we didn't get a story from her. So Ms. Briones was the only other source of information regarding her injuries.
And to be clear, what was the name of,
Okay.
of the child?
Olivia Briones.
So when you said Jessica, you meant to ask to Olivia was for her.
Yes, yes, sir.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
All right, I am handing you what has been labeled State's Exhibit number 4. What is this?
That is a DVD recording of the interview I conducted with Ms. Briones.
Okay, and now, have you reviewed this recording?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and how do you know that you have reviewed this recording?
Because I initialed it with my initials and my badge number, which is 2241.
And is it a fair and accurate depiction of your interview with Ms. Briones?
Yes, ma'am.
Have there been any redactions or deletions at all?
No, ma'am.
Your Honor, I would offer State's Exhibit number 4.
Any objection?
Your Honor, could I just order the witness very briefly?
Yes.
The camera that you talked about in the interview room,
Yes, sir.
that's a hidden camera, correct?
Yes, sir.
I mean, nobody would know it's there, right?
Mm,
Except you, I mean.
Well, I mean, people, I'll be honest, people usually assume they're being recorded. So we've had people spot it. It's not like, I mean, if you look for it, you can see it. Yes, sir.
Okay. No objection, Judge.
All right. State's Exhibit number 4 is admitted without objection.
Okay, Your Honor, may I publish?
Yes.
Detective Juarez, have you seen any photos of Olivia prior to this?
I don't think so, ma'am. No.
So you have no idea what the extent of her physical injuries were?
No, ma'am.
I apologize for the technical.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give you your break for today. We're going to come back tomorrow. We're going to come back tomorrow at 10:30, please. Because we're coming back at 10:30 tomorrow, is that correct? Ms. Ferguson? The parking garage can get filled up because, mind you, everybody who is here at 9 o'clock in this building, they are in that garage. So you may need to come a little bit earlier so that you can make sure that you have a parking space. You've heard some evidence in this case. You're not allowed to discuss it amongst yourself. You're not allowed to watch anything or view anything or do any type of investigation on your own. Everything that you need to make a decision in this case and everything that you need to hear will be from inside this courtroom. Does everyone understand?
Yes.
All right, so we'll be back at 10:30. And what we're going to do is there'll be testimony from 10:30 to 12. Then I'll give you your lunch break. And then we'll come back in the afternoon. Any questions? All right, everyone, please rise for the jurors.